So I am here with Michelle Warner from Networking That Pays. And I feel like I'm her biggest fan, but I also feel like everyone who interviews Michelle is her biggest fan. And I think, Michelle, you just are pointing out something that is not obvious anymore for some reason. But once you hear it, it just makes so much sense. And that's that there's so much more than building an audience. We have to build our network and nurture relationships. And I'd love for you to just do your thing and grab the soapbox and talk about why it's so important to think about your network.
Oh my gosh, I will grab that soapbox. First off, thank you for having me. And I want to say I have to be one of your biggest fans. I love the conversations that we have and when you reach out to me. So thank you for having me here. Networking, it can be, I don't want to say it is, but it can be for so many people such a kind of nasty, dirty word, and also something that brings up all of this anxiety. And that was definitely true for me. I'm an introvert. I do not enjoy a traditional network type situation, right? Where you're put in a room and you have to meet folks and have small talk and all these things. And at the same time, I have now been an entrepreneur for, gosh, we're going on like 20 years at this point. And I know that there's a real cruel reality, which is that over and over and over again, I see the truth that your business is the average of your network, the success of your business. The same way they say that, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. No matter how many fancy strategies you have and no matter how good you are at business, the success of your business is the success of anything you're doing in life, really, is the average of the quality of your network. It's something that we can't get away with. And so through different ventures that I have launched, I realized I have to figure this out for myself, or I'm not going to be able to have the type of success and the type of businesses that I want to have. And so what I realized, going back actually to my MBA education, where I spent 2 semesters studying how networks are actually the science behind networks, how they operate, interpersonal communications, and how networks are actually structured. You can diagram them. It's wild. And I realized there's a science and a system to this that most of us are missing, most of us don't realize exist. And that is why networking can feel so awkward and uncomfortable. And it's because we don't actually understand what's happening. And like anything else, until you kind of get to the root cause and understand the whys behind it, you're just kind of slapping band-aids and weird strategies on top of something without realizing why you're doing it. And so then, of course, it's awkward because you don't know to what purpose you're doing it. Therefore, you're networking with the wrong people and everything gets messed up. And so when I talk about networking now, I want people to understand how networks actually operate and how to do it intentionally and realistically so that you're building real relationships as opposed to just saying, oh, I better go network and, throwing virtual business cards out into the world and hoping something happens.
And this is different than building your list, right?
Yes.
Your network. Why is this different?
Completely different than building your list. And building your list is essentially a group of followers that you have. And that there's a point to that. Don't get me wrong, right? There's a marketing function of that. But you don't have a personal relationship with those folks. And your network, when you're building a network, you're talking about building a support system. There's some science behind it that says you can have up to 150 people in your network at any one time. There's a ton that goes into that, but I share that number because that number tends to shock people. It tends to shock people when I say you can only have 150 stable social relationships in your life. People either say, oh my gosh, that is way too many. I cannot imagine having that many, which I get and we can talk about. That doesn't mean you have to be best friends with all those 150 people. Or they say, no, I have 12,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's my network. I'm like, no, that's not your network. You do not know those people. You're not in a stable social relationship with them. They are your followers. And that's very different. That is a marketing type function. Whereas your network, those are the people who are supporting you, who you actually have relationships with, who can help push you and do different things. It plays a very different role.
Yeah, I want to dive into questions that are way too far ahead right now, but
Yeah.
let me try to rein it in. First, I want to ask you, so we have all of these fans, and then we have this network that we need to be nurturing and growing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know a lot of people will grow their network in the collaboration space. We do it for the sake of it. We recruit hundreds of affiliates. We can go really overboard.
Yeah.
But then we're not nurturing these relationships.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk about building and nurturing the right relationships,
Yep.
and like getting a little ahead of myself, also determining which ones we should be focusing on.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting ahead of yourself at all because it is a quality over quantity situation. Again, if you're promoting a book, if you're working on your business, whatever types of collaborations that you're building, your brain is instantly thinking, how many people can help me, right? You're doing some sort of math equation to reach as many people as humanly possible. And I call that a traffic mindset. And that's of a mindset that you are just trying to collect all the possible leads, followers, whatever we want to call it, possible, and you're not really concerned about quality. And when you're doing that, your conversion rate is going to be really low to whatever you want them to do, and there's not going to be much of loyalty to you, right? Whereas on the other side of the spectrum from traffic is relationship marketing or relationship building. And that's when you're trying to make whatever you're trying to make happen, right? In your business, in your life, for whatever reason you want all these collaborations, you're trying to make them happen by having some key relationships in place who are going to help you and go to bat with you. And they're going to help share your story. And the problem is when you recruit too many of those people and you don't have actual relationships with them, they're not going to try very hard for you, right? And you're going to get much more bang for your buck by finding and building actual relationships with an appropriate number of people who are going to absolutely, go to the floor for you and really truly help you, as opposed to folks who are just going to, hit repost or do some sort of frankly, very surface level engagement that is not going to bring their followers along. If the point of affiliates is to borrow to me, I call it borrow an audience, right? If the point is to borrow their audience and get your work in front of their audience, you also need to transfer trust in that situation, right? We hear about like know, like, and trust in terms of marketing and getting followers on. And if you have an affiliate who's going to try to promote something for you, it's not going to work if they don't put their muscle behind you and say, I trust this person. And there's a transfer of trust then that happens and their followers will follow you. If you don't have an actual relationship with that person, they're not going to try hard enough to transfer that trust, and your work is it's going to be a giant waste of time.
And it also doesn't feel good when you become a super affiliate and you just have this link tree every time you send an email of stuff. And everyone knows you're just an affiliate. It makes me not even want to be, I don't want to be an affiliate. If you need to track me, use UTM parameters. But yeah, you want to respect your audience and your network. And I feel like there's a happy medium where
and
it's promoting people we love, then it's fun, it feels good, and it works.
Yeah, and it's understanding that relationship that's happening, right? Maybe there are some transactional traffic relationships that can make sense. Maybe you're an affiliate for a software company or something, and like all of your followers need to know how to set up an email list. I don't know, but like that is normal to me. But if somebody's work is out in the world and you're promoting that person's work, that starts feeling weird if it's just this big long list. And it doesn't only feel weird to you as the person who might be affiliating for it, but it starts to feel weird to your audience because you want to, like you say, you want to respect your audience and you want them to trust what you are sending out into the world. And therefore, you want to trust what you're sending out into the world. And so it's just normal human reaction that if you don't have a relationship with the person who's asking you to promote their stuff, you are just not going to put the same energy behind it that you would if you have a real relationship with it.
Yeah. And something we've talked about, which I think confused both of us a little bit, was like having the list with the goal of attracting the right partners versus having the list with the goal of marketing you.
Yeah.
So there's different reasons to have a list and to have partners.
Yeah, that's definitely an advanced conversation, right? But there is the point of thinking, why am I doing one of these activities? And there are separate activities. If you are thinking about marketing something, there are two separate things that you need to do, right? Number one, you need to borrow an audience. Like I said, you will be hard pressed to find me tell you that you should like play an algorithm game and find your leads trying to just post and find them all organically. Your best bet is to go find people who already have an audience who will be interested in your offer or your thing or whatever you're doing and figure out a way to collaborate with them. And so therefore, when you are looking to start promoting something, you have two tasks to do. You have to have a bench full of people that you're ready to collaborate with. And then you also have to have a means to eventually tell the audience that you have borrowed and now has started to follow you what you would like them to do. And so sometimes there's confusion over what are you using your different marketing assets for, and what's their primary purpose, right? Maybe you have a podcast, and frankly, maybe the point of your podcast is to invite folks on so that you can get to know them for potential collaborations. And it's still useful information and your audience will still love it. But the central point of that podcast is maybe, I mean, it sounds very weird to say out loud if this is a new concept for folks, but maybe the central point of that podcast is not actually to serve your end audience. Maybe it's for you to build relationships with your guests.
Yeah.
I also see a lot of people who get a ton of work when we're talking about this, might be out of the scope of this audience, but I see a lot of people who get a ton of work by inviting prospective clients to be their guests on various live shows. And that builds a certain loyalty, builds a certain relationship, and then the guest is more likely to do work. No one in the audience ever buys, but it's still worth it to do the activity because the guests, will become clients. And then in the same deal with your list, what is the point of your list? Is the point of your list to build relationships, or is it to offer, your widget, whatever that might be?
Yeah. And what's a good litmus test for you and your potential collab buddies to agree, like, this is a good idea. You're worth my time.
You're worth my time. Yeah. So I talk about something called an ideal connection avatar. And that is very similar. People have probably heard about ideal brand avatars, ideal client avatars, where you're understanding who your ultimate audience is. Well, your collaboration partners, there's also an ideal connection avatar. Who is the ideal person that you should be connecting with? And I think that person is somebody who shares your same audience in a non-competitive way, right? And a lot of times non-competitive can be a lot closer to what you think it is, meaning it may be people who look competitive on the surface, but absolutely aren't once you kind of dig into how they're actually helping folks. And you can realize that, yeah, we have the same audience. Therefore, I can borrow your audience and provide value with something that you are not providing them with. And they in turn will actually be interested in my stuff. And this is one of the key questions that nobody asks when they're networking and why networking is so terrible. We don't think about who we should actually be connecting with. So we go and connect with a bunch of people and then feel guilty that there's not an obvious thing to do next. So we sit there with a huge stack of virtual business cards thinking, oh God, now I have to follow up with all these people and figure out something to say. What's the point? There is no point because you have no natural reason that you should have been networking. So I'm a big fan of, before you do any kind of connecting, identify who is that ideal connection avatar, who has your audience, how can you help that audience, and then go find those people and be proactive about it as opposed to reactive, just kind of hoping you show up somewhere and, see who you meet and hopefully you get lucky.
And this question might be more for me than anyone else, but
Let's do it.
what do you do when they're not your ideal connection and they're reaching out to connect?
A polite boundary and a polite, I'm sorry, I don't have time, goes really far. And that's where we come back to, you have 150 people that you can be connected to in your life. And that includes your family and your friends and everybody in your life. And so frankly, if someone's trying to connect with you and there's no point, I think that you can very kindly say, no. And that's uncomfortable. But at the same time, what's the alternative? A bunch of wasted time for both of you. Because if there's not a natural way to collaborate, you're just going to be frustrated trying to force something along that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And people can feel really uncomfortable about that. And I always say, if this is someone that you want to be friends with, I'm certainly not telling you to just dump people. They can take a friend slot in your network. They're welcome to do that. But if we are talking about advancing your business priorities or creative project priorities, whatever you have going on, you owe that to yourself and whatever you're building and putting out into the world to use your time as effectively as you can. And that does not include connecting with people that you blatantly know are bad connections. You don't have time for it.
Well, there is something that, for anyone who's listening, Michelle Warner has available that is a free training, and she did not ask me to do this. I just friggin' love this so much, and it changed the way that I built my brand, and I built it I built it extremely quickly by implementing a lot of the stuff that Michelle teaches. And
Awesome.
It is so worth your time. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. Check out themichellewarner.com/free training. How long is it, Michelle?
I think it's about 45 minutes. It may go up to an hour, but yeah, it's worth it. It's not, high level stuff. We get
Yeah.
into these science concepts that we're talking about here. Yeah.
One of the best uses of 45 minutes of my time I've ever used for my business. And Michelle, I'd say you are one of the top 5 reasons that I have this online brand that I grew so quickly. So thank you so much. I love what you're putting out into the world. And you know what? Just being a part of your email list is even fun. It's sassy and truthful and no bullshit. And I just love it.
Well, thank you. I will take that praise all day long. That's what I'm here for is I want to make this stuff doable for people and practical and just explain how things work because a lot of people are wasting a lot of time because none of us know that these concepts exist.
Yep. Any parting words? Last piece of wisdom?
Last piece of wisdom, be honest and I am going to put in a plug for being specific in your outreach. How's that? Because a lot of us live in a world of getting a lot of outreach from people that's just like, hey, saw you speak the other day. It was great. Thank you. Or I always laugh at like the Instagram comments where we think we're connecting with someone and there's like an inspirational quote and the comment is, thanks, needed to hear that today. Nobody is connecting over those types of moments. If you can take those same 5 seconds that you took to write, hey, needed to hear this today, or hey, great job, and say something specific to the person, say, why you needed to hear that today, what you took away from it, what it meant to you, just taking 5 seconds to make something specific, and I call it standing out like a sore thumb in a good way, is going to change everything about how you connect with folks. We keep it at this real surface level. And when you can personalize something literally with 2 words, wow, people remember that because it just doesn't exist right now.
And that is exactly how I've made all of my connections in the past year. Exactly.
Yep. And it doesn't take notebooks full. When I talk about this, people are like, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember things about people? It just doesn't take that kind of effort when you're really connected to who you want to be connected with. And you're just thinking about what is one specific thing that I can say. It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be something that you remembered from a year ago. It just needs to be specific.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you. This is a milestone for me.
Well, we have been waiting a while to get this, so I'm so glad we got it on the books. I am so thrilled to see you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, everyone, themichellewarner.com. Please check her out. She's the best.